You've probably seen the bump cube, more commonly known as the mirror cube, or the color block, which is a bump cube with colored faces. But let me present to you the anti-bump cube, a puzzle that instead of having differently sized pieces, has differently sized groups of colors. Welcome to today's episode of Custom Cuber. What makes a bump cube different from a regular one is its offset centers. Instead of being in the middle, the bump cube's centers are pushed closer to a certain corner. Because of this, the solver has to figure out which parts go together based on size and shape instead of colors. I wanted to do something that's kind of the reverse of that. In the anti-bump cube, the shapes of the cube's pieces, or cubies, remain the same. If we turn the faces, we can see that the base puzzle is just a regular black 3x3 cube. In this puzzle, it's the group of colors that represent the shape and size irregularities. We have different chunks of blocks represented by different colors. For example, this represents a 1x1x1 yellow block. This set of blue squares represents a group of 3 blocks placed beside each other, forming a 1x3 chunk. If we put these two puzzles side by side, we can see the similarities in the layout. This blue chunk is equivalent to this corner of the bump cube. This white edge, shown in a 1x2 chunk, is equivalent to this edge. We can also take a look at the bigger chunks. This mini 3x3 cube here is equivalent to this chunk. You might have noticed though that the shapes formed by the chunks of the colored blocks aren't really similar to the ones on the bump cube. For example, we won't see a part shaped like a perfect cube like this anywhere on the bump cube. I'll show you why in a bit. Before I go any further, I'd like to say thank you to the channel's subscribers. I really appreciate the support. But if you're new here and you like puzzles, I hope you'll consider subscribing too. It's just one click away, but it helps the channel get the content out there to more puzzle lovers like you. I post weekly videos of new and original puzzles here, but you can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where I share behind-the-scenes posts about the cubes I make. It would be so awesome to see you there, so check out the links in the description below. And with that, let's get back to today's new puzzle. The shapes in the anti-bump cube don't have the same size as those in the original bump cube, because in this puzzle, the movement of the centerpiece is standard. Take this face, for example. The centerpiece here is represented by the set of blue squares. If this were in the actual center of the cube, it would occupy the 4 squares here. But in the anti-bump cube, it's moved by 1 square to the right and 1 square to the top. If we take a look at another centerpiece, for example this orange one, we'll see the same offset amount. 1 square to the side, 1 square to the top. All the other centerpieces follow the same pattern. They're offset by 1 square on 2 axes. In the bump cube though, the offsets aren't standard. For example, this centerpiece is closer to the corner compared to this other one that's almost in the actual center of the puzzle. Because of the standard positioning of the components of the face designs, creating the anti-bump cube just required designing 2 faces that were repeated 3 times on adjacent sides. The design for this face is the same one used for these other 2, and the same thing applies to this other face, which has copies of it on these 2 faces. As you may have noticed, this puzzle has a few uneven plastic edges, and some of the printed stickers are not in their best condition. That's because I used a budget cube as the base for this project, and this was actually one of the first cubes I modded, so it has experienced some wear and tear. For me, that's fine, mainly because I wanted to experiment with the design and how that affects the solve. I wasn't really building a cube for regular solving. Like my other projects, I used matte sticker paper with an inkjet printer and I cut the individual pieces by hand. Speaking of the solve, this puzzle uses the same principles used for regular 3x3 cubes, except for a few considerations. First, the centers must be oriented correctly. They have to face a certain way to make the edges match. Figuring out how the centers should be oriented is a matter of knowing that two key colors in the cube should be turned towards each other. For example, these three centers with small blue squares all have the blue parts converging towards this corner. For the opposite faces, it's the yellow parts of the centerpiece that converge into a corner. Aside from center orientation, some of the pieces are also identical, which can lead to parities if the solver accidentally interchanges these parts while solving. Now it's time to scramble this. Like the 6x6x6 spiral cube, which you can find on the top right of this video, the anti-bump cube just looks like a scrambled 6x6 when it's unsolved. So if you weren't aware of how the anti-bump cube looks like when it's solved, how would you figure out the pattern in this mess of colors? Thanks for checking out the anti-bump cube. This is one of the simpler mods that I've made, and I think there's a lot of other patterns that can be integrated into a simple 6x6 grid that's overlaid on a 3x3x3 cube. Do you think it's still interesting to explore the possibilities of this, or has this idea been overused? I hope to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and see you all next time.